Yeah, thank you, Jason, for getting us for the introduction this morning. And I want to thank Annie Mustafarai and the rest of the organizers for putting this panel together and inviting me. The panel is Publish Your Research at ICWSM. We have a lot of newcomers to the conference, and we also have a lot of old hands who maybe haven't participated in a while. So I think this is a really exciting panelist. I'll be your moderator. I'm James Caverly. I'm a professor at Texas A&M University in computer science. I've been active in this conference since the early days. And in fact, I found some of my old, this is from 2008. And for those of you who keep swag from conferences, I actually have a bag from the second ICWSM.
Wow.
It's a collector's item. But we're very excited to have two really great panelists with us today. So we have Professor Jaron Budak from the University of Michigan School of Information. Welcome, Jaron.
Thank you. Great to be here.
She serves as editor-in-chief, and we'll come back to what that means in just a moment. And our other panelist is Professor Kenny Joseph from the University of Buffalo. Welcome, Kenny.
Thank you.
And Kenny is serving as one of our program chairs this year. And both, of course, are very active researchers who've been working for many, many years in themes related to this conference. And so kind of beyond this panel, there'll be really excellent resources to talk to, and I'm sure would be happy to answer any questions you might have offline. Okay, so this is a panel, so let's turn it over to the panelist. So to start things off with, so I introduced you both. We have an editor-in-chief, we have a program chair. For many conferences, this is confusing, and I don't know what it really means. So could you kind of explain your roles, how they're different, and then in particular, think about how it might affect a prospective author in terms of those roles?
Yeah, so I'll get started. I think one important role of an editor-in-chief for our conference is to provide some continuity. So we serve for 3 years, and we work with program chairs to kind of all collectively, basically come up with the program, which is basically the papers that we accept. So I actually had served as a program chair before, an editor, serving as an editor-in-chief. So kind of got to experience both sides of this coin, if you will. So there are some distinctions. We editors-in-chief only are kind of overseeing the full papers, but basically throughout the years, while program chairs have kind of bigger responsibilities in a given year. So I guess that's one high-level aspect that I'll highlight. Maybe after Kenny sort of shares what he thinks what a program chair does, we can have that be a little bit more interactive.
So it might be useful also to just kind of give like a general the other parts of the structure too, since it was something that I learned more recently, which is right. So there are reviewers, right? The reviewers review the paper. There's a senior program committee. So a senior program committee is on each round will manage somewhere between 2 and 4 papers, let's say. And so they are the person who organizes the reviews and makes a suggestion to the program chairs and the editors-in-chief for a final decision on the paper. So that decision can be, at ICWSM, that decision can be accept or revise and resubmit or reject, right? And so one of the roles, I think, of the program chair is to work through all of those decisions and make sure that there are no conflicts, right? We assign individuals to the papers to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest, right? And then we work through those decisions, and then we send out those decisions to the authors. I think that as Jaron mentioned, the other piece is the program chairs are also responsible for setting up the program for a given year. So we organize the program into sessions, and we work with the virtual chairs to make sure that that schedule works and it's an engaging conference.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of sort of what is it that we do to get there, part of it is sort of not glamorous, sort of like chasing reviewers and so forth. But the structure that we have is that we have, as Kenny was saying, senior PC and then PC, who the senior PC work with. And at the ICWSM, we really believe and trust our senior program committee, and so want to empower them to kind of make the decisions as to who are the right reviewers to work with. So unlike other conferences, there's a lot of bidding. Here we as the editors-in-chief and the program chairs, when the papers arrive, we kind of have this 100 papers we're trying to assign. We also don't make this automatically. We are going through those papers, trying to see who would be the best in our senior PC to assess and find people to assess that paper. So there's a lag between when their paper is submitted to when the senior PC get those papers, and the reasons that we are working hard there trying to figure out what's the right balance, and keeping in mind the kind of senior PC capacity that we have, as well as the papers that we have. So and then we also, once the senior PC decisions come in, again, we trust them. They're great people. So chances are in most cases, we're just going to agree to what they're saying. There are a few cases where, because we get to see, over 3 years or over a year, over many papers, we get to see many papers, we can say, well, so you gave this, but how about, so there might be certain places where people individually have different thresholds, and we're sort of trying to make those be a little bit more balanced across the papers. So there might be some interactions where we're trying to recalibrate, if you will. So that's another big part of what we do.
Great. And so just as a reminder or I guess as a first announcement for our audience members, if you do have a question, you can post it either in the Gather chat, or you can post it on the Slack channel. There's a panels channel that you can post to. And we have a volunteer who's going to grab those questions and make sure that your panelists have an opportunity to answer them. So please get those questions coming in. We really appreciate that. Okay, so that's kind of we can talk a little bit more about process then, just for a moment. So you mentioned, I guess I can submit my paper and get a clean accept. I could get a resubmit. I could get an outright reject. In terms of the cycles, is it sort of balanced across the year? Is there some gamesmanship we should do as authors? Those kinds of things, sort of to demystify the process a little bit.
Yeah, great question. So I don't think that we have we have 3 rounds. We have September, January, and May. And then the number of papers we get are not balanced. But we try to kind of warn our senior PC and try to make sure that we have enough of a capacity for each round. So May tends to be the lightest. And the one thing is we also have desk rejects. So in addition to those three decisions, I just want to point it out. It's not very common, but we also want to save people the time if the paper is not going to make it, so that we give them enough time to edit and go to the next thing. So people should not game the system, I guess. But it might be useful to keep in mind that a lot of papers get revise and resubmit. So, and I think that's a great thing. I think that makes actually that we made that switch a couple of years ago, and I think I made our conference stronger. So keeping in mind that reviewers will want to make your paper better and will probably ask for things. So if you send something in January, chances are it will be a revise and resubmit, in which case it would be in next year's program. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't think that we're in a space where you're like, you need actual physical paper copies so people can, of course, share their papers once it gets accepted. But if they want to keep that in mind in when they submit things, that might be one thing I would say. Kenny, I don't know if you have any other.
No, I think that covers it. I think that the only thing I'll say is to express to explicitly address the gamesmanship piece. I think like the fact that there.
I meant that, by the way, I meant that in not just that my hunch is that there is no gamesmanship, but just that there is an imbalance. And so, papers are treated just as fairly in May as they are at the other deadlines. But there may be an imbalance in the number of papers being considered.
Yep, exactly. And you took the words out of my mouth. I think just like expressing that point that like just because they're more or less, the process is the same. So I think that's what we would hope for, and I think the way it works.
Well, folks, we thank you. We do have questions from our audience already, so this is great. So let's go with our first question, which is related to, I would call this kind of getting more involved, right? Mm-hmm. So I can imagine, you are, maybe you're a PhD student, or you're a new researcher. Maybe you've even published a few papers, but you're not really, you don't know how to get more involved. So for example, is there a way that participants could become reviewers or volunteer to review some papers or to become kind of more integrated into the conference? What are the best pathways forward for that?
You want to start, Jared?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think, that's a great question. I would say, so the one simple way might be to reach out to the kind of PC chairs and editors in chief, and sort of saying, hey, I'm interested in reviewing. Here's my, and if you can make our lives easier so that we don't have to do search kind of ourselves, saying, hey, here are my papers that are sort of related, and here's what I have done. So those kinds of things are quite helpful. And then if that's the case, we will add you to the system. The other way is that, again, as I said, we empower our senior PC. So they sometimes kind of invite people. We don't have a fixed set of reviewers that we say has to be from that group. A senior PC that we assign to a paper might say, oh, I know just the right person, and that person is actually not on our system, and they will add that person as well. So you can write to us, you can work with your professor who might be a little bit more connected. So I sometimes ask my students, I really trust, I think that they're great. So I ask them to do reviews, and I know that they get invited by other people as well. So I think those would be a couple of processes that you can use in this case.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. I think it's an interesting place to think about growth at ICWSM, is how we make this process kind of more efficient, especially as the community grows. But I would just say I agree with kind of what was said, right? Like I think reviews take practice, just like everything else we do here, and trying to find ways to do that practice and trying to reach out and kind of be vocal. If you know someone who's a senior committee member and saying, I'd like to try giving these reviews and working with someone, right? So I encourage people to volunteer through the routes that Jaren mentioned, but to also acknowledge that like reviewing is a process that takes work, just like everything else we do in academia, and to really focus on how to become a better reviewer, and not only just as a kind of a line on the CV.
Yeah.
And for those of you, just from my experiences, you may think to yourself, well, I don't really know anybody at this conference, or I don't, I see Kenny is in this panel, but I can't email him. You can. Volunteering is, we're always looking for more help.
Yeah.
So fire that email. Hey, I saw your panel. I'm following up. Here it is. That would, to me, would be a great step.
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to say, it's not about the process of volunteering, but after you volunteer, then we add you to the system. Please upload papers that you have worked on. So part of it is that again, senior PC are looking for reviewers. They might know people that might go direct to those people, but if they don't know you, what's the system, the way that it works is when you're trying to assign reviewers to a system, you can see matches as a function of how well that paper matches the papers that they have uploaded. So people senior PC can use those to sort of filter things out. So if you don't have that, and if they're not representative of the kinds of your work or the things that you're interested in, you're also not going to get the most out of the system. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'll also just highlight that point, because the more information you have, the easier it is to give you papers that we think not only you'll provide a good review for, but papers that you'll enjoy reading, right? Like I find that I give the best reviews for the papers that are like in my wheelhouse that I enjoy reading. And the only way for us to know that on the other side, to assign you those papers, is to have information about you in the system.
So let's, a slightly different question. I'm going to put this to Kenny to start off with, is to think about kind of the conference scope. And over the years, I would say, you know, we've had a wide variety of sort of different kinds of papers published here, right? Sort of different methodologies, because again, we're historically kind of drawing from many different communities and in essence, sort of forming a new community. So could you talk a little bit about, you know, not like, is my paper in scope? Should I submit it? Like sort of strategies to figure out if sort of methodologically or topic wise, you know, my work is a good fit for this conference. Like how would I go about doing that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that the best way, just to like answer that last piece first, which is how would I go about sort of understanding fit, is to read papers from this conference and to watch the presentations, right? I think that, I personally made this mistake early on in my career, is I kind of thought that I could take a paper that I thought was interesting and submit it to, you know, the conferences that I thought I was supposed to submit it to, right? So ICWSM, CSCW, let's pick those two, right? Those feel on the surface pretty similar, but if you actually go and read the papers at those conferences, they're quite different. They have sort of a different aim and a different audience, and it doesn't mean that the same work can't necessarily go to either place, but you have to frame the work and embed your work within that conference. And the easiest way to do that is to read and to attend the conference if possible, right? But reading we can do from our chairs at home. This year we can also attend, but maybe not always. So I think that's a major thing. I think I'll also just kind of give a sense of what I have come to understand as an ICWSM paper is one that I think there's a lot of recipes, I guess. There are plenty of papers that provide innovative methods. There are plenty of papers that address more substantive social science questions. I guess the thing I'll say is I enjoy seeing both. And I think that there is sometimes a hesitancy to submit papers that don't have methodological innovation to the conference. And I think that I hope that we can sort of encourage people not to stress so much about that, right? I think the most important thing about papers here are that I think the research questions tend to be super interesting. They're important research questions that should be asked about how people exist in the online world, how they behave socially. And I think that's the most important piece. And I think the other most important piece is that you don't engage superficially with either the social science literature or the computer science literature, right? And that's a challenge. I don't deny that. I think that makes ICWSM, that's what makes the papers here great, is that they sort of are able to engage with both those literatures. So it doesn't have to only be methodological. It doesn't have to be only substantive. You can do a little bit of both. But I think engaging with both the literatures is super important.
Yeah, that sounds great. The only thing that I think it might be, well, one thing that I think is important also is just sort of being measured in claims. And so that's sort of like the limitation, acknowledging the limitations of the work, and given the kind of work that we do at ICWSM and its implications for our society. So that's something that I see myself and I see our senior PC and our PC sort of push back again. So that's not saying whether or not your work fits in, but when you are framing what is it that you're doing, being very aware of what it does and what it actually doesn't do. So that's another important point too, I think. our community.
Great. And so again, audience members, if you have questions, throw them in the Gather chat or in the Slack channel, and we will try to get to them. We actually have a couple of questions here from the audience that I'm going to kind of pair, because they're both about some sort of the details of the publication. So the first one is about sort of help us understand better, is ICWSM, are these considered, a conference that has an archival proceedings with it? Are there different tracks or are papers treated differently? Kind of help us understand better how papers are viewed or treated.
Kenny, do you want to take that as a PC chair? Because we have some archival, some non-archival, and the way that they're archived is different. So
yeah, so I think that's a major distinction that we'll make for this particular question is there is both an archival track, which is sort of more along the lines of traditional CS conferences, where this is a submission that shouldn't have been submitted elsewhere. It should be new work, and that's sort of a terminal publication for the work. And then there's also non-archival. Traditionally, I think that we've called this the social physics and the social sciences track, right? Which are just disciplines where conference submissions are not terminal publications. Typically, you want to send them to a journal, and of course, a journal in your field, right? But we provide the opportunity to submit that work and to have it reviewed and accepted into the conference for presentation. It's just not archived, so you can resubmit it elsewhere. We also do accept work that is already in submission elsewhere for the non-archival track only.
Yeah, I think I have done, like, just for my personal, I have done, I've submitted and presented both non-archival and archival kind of work at ICWSM. I really enjoyed, because you guys basically were hoping to engage, so kind of, our engagement, increase our engagement with social scientists. So we're hoping to use that as a mechanism for various reasons, right? There are certain social science fields that they want their papers published in certain places. So we're, I think I would say, like, I would like to highly encourage folks who want to get feedback from our community to use that track as well.
So just to clarify, for these two tracks, the kind of review procedures are different, or they're the same?
So they are, so in terms of the threshold of if it's a good work to be presented is the same. So the things that change a little bit over the years is when I was PC chair in 2019, we were only accepting the social science track in January round. So those kinds of things, can you please correct me? This year, I think we allowed throughout the year. So that's the one process thing that is slightly different, and they are they're not published. So
yeah, that's great.
Great. Okay, so there's a related question to this, which is about conference rankings. And we know for many promotion and tenure committees, we're relying on, is this an A conference, a B conference, et cetera, even if ICWSM has a history and has low acceptance rates and has a good reputation, so forth. Is there anything to share about sort of these official conference rankings? Anything happening there?
Yeah, a great question. So we were unaware until a couple of months ago when we were warned to this, and so really appreciate our community members bringing this up for us. So I think for that particular one, they do that once a year. So I have subscribed to their mailing list, hoping that next time when there is a time to kind of get reviewed, we're going to get notifications to be able to do something about that. So that's one thing that I'll say, and we are aware, and we'll try to make sure that our members who want to publish with us and want to get tenure and be recognized for their work do so. So in progress is what I will say for this particular one.
Great. Okay, so let's, again, folks, if you have questions, throw them in the Gather chat or the Slack channel. Kind kind of change it up for a second here and thinking about, I've written a paper and I've gotten my reviews back, and it's my first paper I've written and I'm unhappy. I got rejected. Okay. Can you talk about kind of the quality of reviews, the fact that I'm upset, but, can I have assurances that, the reviews are of good quality, that, I should respect the reviews, or, maybe this is a short review and it's dismissive and I should have some sort of recourse? Kind of walk me through as a newly rejected author and kind of help me know the steps I should take in terms of moving forward.
So I think, so one thing I'll say, I guess, at the beginning is no one likes to get rejected, but we all get rejected, right? So I think
We've
I
all been
mentioned
rejected.
already that I got rejected.
That's
I think I
right.
didn't mention this, the first 5 times I submitted to ICWSM. And, I've learned from that, and now I get rejected most times, but not every time. And so it's part of the process. But one thing that I will say that I didn't realize as an early career researcher is that a rejection is not the end of the road for a paper. And I think I actually, made this mistake where I thought it was, and I kind of trashed work that I think would have ended up somewhere. A rejection is an opportunity to improve your work, and to take some feedback seriously, and to look at other feedback and say, this doesn't fit what I think this paper should be, and reject it. And to get that work back out into the world, right? So I encourage people to think both failure is inevitable, to get upset about it, to sleep on that for a couple of days, read it once, forget about it for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, come back, read it with a clear head, and think about how you can do better with, make a better paper with what you've gotten. That's sort of a broad point saying no one likes most reviews, but hopefully you can accept some of them as constructive. I think the point about reviewer quality, I will say kind of openly, I think that this has improved greatly over the years at ICWSM. I think reviews continue to get better. Not all reviews are going to be perfect. If you don't like the way that things are reviewed, we encourage you to come on board and become a reviewer, to make that better. But I think that that's a process that we as PC chairs are trying to constantly refine, and to constantly push out to SPC, the senior program committee, ways to improve those reviews. We've been changing the form. Jaren has some changes that I know are coming up and will be discussed later in the conference. So there are procedural things that we can try to do. But I think the major thing on mine is also to just kind of harp on the folks that are reviewers here, to acknowledge that there's a person on the other side of your review. And that means that, no, you shouldn't just accept the paper to make them feel good. Rejection is part of the process. But you can reject a paper and be constructive. And if you're not, I think you may be harming the individual on the other side. Maybe they're a first-year grad student, and they want to grow with the work. And so I encourage you to think about it from that angle, and also to think about it from the angle of there are other people that are going to be seeing your reviews, and we strongly discourage you from writing reviews that aren't nice. And again, you can be constructive and point out the flaws in the work, while being nice about it. I think I answered parts of your question, at least.
That's great. John, do you have anything to add? Because we have a bunch of questions coming in as well, but please.
We can go to the one high level thing I would say is we sometimes get emails. Well, if you have to send, I will say this strategically, if you have to send an email, just being I think maybe writing it with a clear mind of not angry and in a constructive way, writing that would serve you well. It would serve you really so that would be the one high level thing I will say.
So we were looking at our papers getting rejected, and again, we've all had papers rejected. Our careers are basically built on rejections. So for those of you getting started, this is normal. Okay, this is very normal. So the next step up would be, I got to resubmit. I got an R&R. So could you talk a little bit about that process? So do I really have to do all of the revisions the reviewers suggested? So talk about that, and also sort of related to that is, if can I resubmit my work even if it wasn't a revise and resubmit? In other words, it was rejected and I spent some time with it and I could still resubmit it. So sort of talk about that kind of resubmission process.
Yeah, so we actually have some changes coming for that second part of the question. But the first part is we ask and we check that our senior PC have a roadmap for each paper that had a revise and resubmit. So that should be your really go-to guide for the kinds of things that really need to be done. And so there might be some points that some reviewers raised, and our senior PC might say like those are not as high priority. They might not highlight that in their roadmap. In which case, I would that might be sort of less of a concern. So that's the biggest thing that I would really highly rely on. And again, we try to go through those as editors-in-chief and PC chairs to make sure that they are clear enough, and we go back to our senior PC if that's not the case. But hopefully we catch kind of all cases, but there might be some points where that's not the case. In those rare cases, it's I think sort of sending clarification questions to us so that we can look into those is fine, but those are clarification questions, so not like another round of reviews, if you will. In terms of whether or not you can resubmit something that is rejected, we didn't have a clear rule about that until now. So by default, you could, but now we are actually changing that so that you need to wait 6 months for a rejected paper to resubmit that. And that's to really give you some time to, if it's rejected, we thought the reason that it was rejected is our senior PC decided that one round was not enough. So that sort of allows us to have that space. And we're also going to be asking you to share with us where a paper that you're submitting got rejected from, and give you the option to share your reviews with us so that we can use those in our review process. This hasn't been done. This is going to be done starting. So some of the changes that Kenny was saying have been implemented and ready for the next round to go.
Great. Yeah, a bunch more questions in the queue. Thanks, everybody. So there's a question here about recurring difficulties when reviewing submissions. And so I interpret this maybe sort of common, maybe pitfalls that you've seen or encountered over the years, sort of issues that come up sort of over and over that maybe can hurt a paper's chances. That's how I'm interpreting that question. And ask her if you want to. If I ask the wrong question, please clarify, and we'll come back to that. But for common pitfalls.
Yeah. So I think that what Jaron said at the beginning is a really important one to kind of re-highlight, which is not to kind of overclaim what your work does. Research is supposed to kind of be fine-grained, and we're asking very specific questions, right? And so telling me that you've, quote, solved fake news with your new method is I think a very easy thing to pick out for reviewers, right? So these kinds of overclaims, I think, especially in like the first parts of the paper, the first couple of paragraphs and the last couple of paragraphs, I think set the tone for a reviewer in sort of a negative light, right? Like you don't have to solve the world's greatest problems to write a good research paper. And I think that, when I talk to my students about how to write papers in general, I think that that's sort of one piece that I'll highlight. I think there are other things, but don't give the reviewers an easy thing to nitpick at, right? So don't not tell them how many data points you have. Don't not mention the limitations with the data set. Don't not touch on a result that was significant in one form of the regression, but not in another, right? Like these are things that we see. No research is perfect. You're never going to have the final answer to things. And so I encourage you to be clear about these issues that reviewers would pick up on in any case.
Great. Anything to add to that? We have a bunch more questions.
Yeah,
so,
I think exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is great. So sort of a process question. So when we are reviewing papers, if there are additional submission files, data sets, code, et cetera, do we have to look at those? Are those considered part of the submission, or are they purely extra?
So there is some folks share the supplementary materials, and those are supposed to be by design supplementary. And that your work is supposed to stand on its own without the reviewers having to go through that. But they would be helpful for reviewers if they are unclear about like certain fine-grained details. That would be kind of the way that I would use it as a reviewer, is kind of to make sure, gut check that certain things are in place correctly. So I wouldn't rely on putting a lot of things in supplementary material and expecting our viewers are go through that. So the main results, main methods, all of those need to be able to fit in the 10 pages that you're submitting and 12 pages in the final version of the paper.
Okay, another question from the audience. Some other conferences have tutoring programs. So we pair a new reviewer with someone more senior and can kind of learn the ropes, let's say. Is there anything similar in plan for this conference, or do you have any other methods to deal with those kinds of sort of training and sort of leveling up our reviewer pool? Put that one to Kenny.
I'll just say I think it's a good idea. I will leave it to the editor-in-chief, who, again, for the purpose of
the other way.
Yeah, so we don't have a process like that. We should consider these. The challenge that we deal with is that our in each round of our senior PC, we're basically maxed out on how many, like, really we don't have any more senior PC time. But maybe people would be more willing, if it's a more mentoring process, to give a little bit more time. It's a great idea. It's a kind of a capacity issue that sort of hasn't allowed us to act on it, but we should consider.
I mean, I would also imagine there must be some, if a reviewer writes in, a short review or a not well thought out review, I'm assuming that there are processes for the senior PC to engage with them, to help them fix it, so it doesn't go out in that form.
Definitely.
Yeah. So back to those R&R decisions. I've never actually done one. I don't know what they look like. Is there a template, a format? Like, how do I answer that in a way that the reviewers and the SPC are going to be happy with or expect to see?
I think that's a good question. And again, I'll leave it to Jaron to address if there's sort of policy coming down the line. But I will say, like, I'm unaware of a conference that has sort of a rigid form for an R&R. I think it in some ways makes life a bit easier on the author to organize the reviews as they sort of see them. But I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything that's beyond the fact that you're supposed to have a response letter where the senior PC and the PC are going to use that to guide how they're going to read your revise and resubmit. So you want to be very clear what are the things that you address, what are the things that you did not address. I've seen various versions of these. Some people use like table format. Some people have like kind of plain text. It would be, I think, a right thing to do to really address definitely the roadmap in the beginning, and then individually respond to reviewers so that people can use that. But we don't require any structure necessarily.
Yeah, I think the thing, make it clear, as easy as possible, right, for the reviewers and the SPC. So if the roadmap says do X, even if you didn't do X, tell me something about X, right? Don't write a long paragraph or a big multi-page article. Make it very bulleted table, something simple. Yeah, always helpful.
And again, we don't. The other thing is in the revised paper, some folks kind of use coloring, something that makes it a lot easier to make the changes in the paper itself clear as well. Again, that's not required, but it's going to make the job of our reviewing body is easier and will help you.
So, okay, here's one of the all-time classic questions. Thank you, audience, for this one. This is about data sets. I remember I gave a talk when I was in grad school, and I had, a million whatever, and the person says, why not a billion? If you say I have a billion, they say, why not a trillion? So if you have 100, why not 1,000? So the question is about sizes of data sets. Is my data set too small? How do we figure this data set size issue out? How do we have confidence and not just have to face that criticism every time?
I think it's a really good question, and I think we're still, as a community, trying to figure this out. I think the one thing that I'll highlight is that I try as SPC and as program chair as well to emphasize that qualitative methods require different levels of samples than quantitative methods, and that does not make them any less valuable. So qualitative work takes a lot more time than running whatever classifier on 1 billion points. And I think we as a community need to get better about both encouraging qualitative work and bringing it into the community, because I think it's a huge complement to the quantitative work that we see a lot of.
Great answer. I have nothing to add.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our time together in this panel. I want to thank both of our panelists so much for your time and for all of your great answers. Thank you, audience members, for participating and all the great questions. So we can't see anybody, but right now I'm going to do a quick round of applause for our panelists, and I hope you're joining with me in Gather or wherever you are. So that was going to wrap up the panel on publishing your research at ICWSM. We're going to go into a break right now for 15 minutes. Please come back. We'll have a keynote starting in 15 minutes. And for those of you really interested in publishing your research who didn't get to ask a question or you want to hear different perspectives, we will have another version of this panel with a different editor-in-chief and a different program chair in about 13 hours, give or take. I think that's about right. So some of you will get to go to sleep and wake up. Some of you may stay up and join us, but please look on your program and try to join us for that if you're interested. Other than that, hope you enjoy the conference, and it was so nice to see everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.